besties. How are y'all doing? No, seriously. How are you doing? Because I feel like every time I sit down to record one of these episodes, I ask that question. And every time I ask it, I realize that most of us automatically say, I'm fine. And sometimes that's true. But sometimes I'm fine is just the easiest answer. Sometimes I'm fine means we're tired, confused, healing, or we're trying our best and hoping nobody notices we're struggling. And if that's where you are at today, welcome. You're in good company. Grab your coffee, your water, your energy drink, your emotional support snack, or your emotional support animal, and let's have a conversation. Because lately I've been thinking about confidence. Again. I know. Y'all are probably sitting there like, Cody, haven't we talked about confidence enough? Apparently not. Because confidence is one of those things that keeps showing up in different ways. You think you figured it out, and then life hands you a new lesson. And recently, life handed me another one. See, for the longest time, I thought confidence meant finally liking yourself. I thought confidence meant looking in the mirror and loving what you saw. I thought confidence meant walking into a room and feeling secure. And while all those things are a part of it, I've realized confidence is much deeper than that. Because what nobody tells you is what happens after confidence starts showing up. Nobody talks about that part. Nobody talks about the weird stage where people start noticing you again, where you're carrying yourself differently, where you're smiling more, where you're healing, where you're finally starting to believe some of the things you've been telling yourself, and suddenly, people notice. Now, don't get me wrong, being noticed feels good. If you spent years being insecure, compliments feel amazing. Flirting feels amazing. People paying attention to you feels amazing. And honestly, after struggling with insecurities, sometimes it feels validating. Like maybe all the work you've been doing is finally paying off. But here's what I caught myself recently. I realized I was starting to ask myself a question. Do I want attention or do I want connection? Because those aren't the same thing. Not even close. Attention is easy. Connection takes work. Attention is somebody liking your picture. Connection is somebody checking on you when you haven't posted in 3 days. Attention is somebody saying you're pretty. Connection is somebody saying when you're crying in a hoodie with messy hair and absolutely no makeup. Attention is excitement. Connection is consistency. And if you ever experienced real consistency, you know exactly what I mean. I think part of the reason this has been on my mind is because over the last several months, I've had to learn who I am outside of a relationship. And let me tell you, that is way harder than people make it sound. Because when you've spent a lot of time loving somebody else, supporting somebody else, showing up for somebody else, you eventually have to figure out who you are when all that energy comes back to you. Who you are when nobody else is defining your role. Who you are when nobody else is choosing you. Who you are when you're forced to choose yourself. And besties, that question hit me like a truck. Because ever since I started dating back in high school, I would go from one relationship to the next, to the next, to the next. Like, it would take me like 2 months and then I'm in another relationship. As I got older, those relationships got a little bit more serious, and so they started hurting a little bit more, and I had to take some time to heal from the next one. And I never fully, healed, if that makes sense. I never fully, I got over the person, but I never fully, healed myself, found out who I was outside of a relationship, because I didn't want to sit in that. I didn't want to sit in the dark and the lonelies and the feels and all the emotions and all the thoughts and all the questions that I would have to ask myself. Until recently, apparently. Growing up can do that to you. We're learning. Anyways, because for a while, I knew exactly who I was when I was somebody's girlfriend. I knew how to love, how to support, how to show up. But somewhere along the way, I forgot to ask myself who I was outside of that. And healing forced me to answer that question. Not because I wanted to, but because I had to. And let me tell you, healing isn't always pretty. Healing isn't sitting in a field of flowers with inspirational music playing in the background. Healing is ugly crying at 2 a.m. Healing is questioning yourself. Healing is realizing you ignored red flags. Healing is realizing you ignored your own needs. Healing is realizing you haven't been listening to yourself. And one of my relationships that I really sit with to this day, it happened about 3-4 years ago. Me and him have been split up for about 3 to 4 years. But I had my parents, I had my family, I had my friends, I had his family, put that in quotations because they were more his friends. And I had like my work people pointing out all these red flags to me about this person, and I ignored them completely. My pride got in the way. I didn't want to believe anything they said. I wanted to believe that what he was telling me was the truth, and it wasn't just my rose gold colored glasses. And it wasn't until me and my parents had a falling out that I started realizing that it was my pride that was the whole reason I was still with him. We ended up getting engaged. I was with him for 1.5 years before I finally broke it off, because I was tired of constantly crying, of constantly carrying the relationship, of constantly working my ass off in order for him to just do nothing besides play his video games. And I have nothing against people who play video games at all. If that's one of your escapes, go for it. I do not care. Play your video games. I have a problem with video games consuming somebody's life. And that's what this did. He wanted to be a streamer, and so I supported him in his dreams because I would want my partner to support me in my dreams. And it just didn't end the way that I wanted it to end. I ended up breaking off the engagement and breaking up with him. And have y'all ever been in a relationship where people celebrated the ending of y'all's relationship rather than feeling sorry for you? That's how that relationship was. But at the same time, when me and him broke up, it was like a breath of fresh air. And even then, I still didn't take the time to listen to the voice in my head, to heal, to find out who I was outside of a relationship. It took me about 6 months before I jumped into my next relationship. And then that one, I also got engaged. And now me and him are no longer together. We broke up back in November. And now I'm sitting down, taking the time, finding who I am outside of a relationship, and listening to myself. And that's where today's episode really starts, because I think the biggest lesson I've learned recently isn't about confidence. It's about finding your voice, your actual voice, not the one you use at work, not the one you use around certain people, not the one you use when you're trying to make everyone happy. Your voice, the honest one, the real one, the one that's buried underneath everybody else's opinions. When was the last time you listened to yourself? Seriously, when was the last time you sat down and asked yourself what you actually wanted? Not what your family wants, not what social media wants, not what your friends think is best, but you. Because I think a lot of us have gotten so used to asking everybody else for directions that we don't trust ourselves anymore. We poll the group chat, we ask 5 different friends, we look up videos online, we ask strangers for advice, and none of that is bad. But eventually there comes a point where you have to listen to yourself, and that's terrifying. Because what if you're wrong? That's the question, isn't it? What if I'm wrong? What if I make a mistake? What if I trust myself and it blows up in my face? What if people disagree or people leave? And what if people judge me? And suddenly we're back to asking everybody else what we should do, because trusting ourselves feels scary. But if everybody else can trust us, if other people can trust us, why can't we trust ourselves? If my family can trust me, why can't I trust myself? Why do I rely so much on other people's opinions and advice and help when it's my life? Why can't I listen to my voice? I've been there. Actually, let me rephrase that. I've lived there. And sometimes I still visit. Because confidence isn't a destination, it's a practice. It's something you keep choosing every single day. Even with this podcast. Y'all know this podcast started out as a weight loss journey. That's what it was supposed to be. And then life happened, healing happened, growth happened, and suddenly we weren't just talking about weight anymore. We were talking about confidence, self-worth, relationships, body image, learning how to love yourself, learning how to trust yourself, and learning how to become somebody you're proud of. And honestly, there were moments when I questioned it. Moments where I wondered if anybody wanted to hear it. Moments where I wondered if I was sharing too much. Moments where I wondered if people would judge me. And every time I sat down to record, there was this little voice inside my head saying, keep going. And sometimes that voice was shaking. Actually, most of the time it was. Because that's another thing nobody tells you. Your voice doesn't have to be steady to be right. Let me say that again. Your voice does not have to be steady to be right. Your voice doesn't have to be confident to be true, and your voice doesn't have to be loud to matter. I think we have this idea that courage looks fearless, that brave people aren't scared, that confident people never doubt themselves, and that's just not true. Some of the bravest people I've ever met were terrified. They just moved forward anyway. The truth is, sometimes courage sounds like a shaky voice. Sometimes healing, growth, setting a boundary, starting over, choosing your dreams, and choosing yourself all sound like a shaky voice. And maybe that's why I love podcasting so much, because every episode feels like I'm listening to my own voice a little more. Every episode teaches me something. Every episode reminds me that growth isn't about becoming perfect. It's about becoming honest. And besties, can I be real for a second? I think one of the hardest things about finding your voice is realizing it might tell you things you don't want to hear. Sometimes your voice tells you you're settling. Sometimes it tells you you're staying somewhere too long. Sometimes it tells you you're shrinking yourself to make somebody else comfortable. Sometimes it tells you that you're chasing attention when what you really want is connection. And that's uncomfortable. But the truth isn't always convenient. But it is usually freeing. And once you start listening to yourself, something incredible happens. You stop needing everybody else's approval. Not completely, we're human, we all like validation, but you stop depending on it because you start building trust with yourself, and trust with yourself changes everything. You stop asking people to tell you your worth. You stop begging people to choose you. You stop trying to convince people to see your value because you already know it. And that confidence, that's different. That's real confidence. Not confidence that comes from attention. Not confidence that comes from attention. Confidence that comes from self-respect. Confidence that comes from keeping promises to yourself. Confidence that comes from knowing who you are. Confidence that comes from listening to your own voice, even when it shakes. Especially when it shakes. Now, what made me want to talk about that before I continue going into everything else in this episode, my mom owns a flower shop in Fort Worth, and they have a lot of cute little knickknacks. They have cards, they have Consuela bags, they have stuffed animals, they have flowers, obviously, and then they have blankets and a lot of cool stuff. We love cards, we love stickers. They have cards, they have stickers, and one of the cards that they just posted was find your voice, then listen to it, even when it shakes, especially then. And I saw that, and I texted my mom, and I was like, hey, can I use this in my next podcast episode? She was like, yeah, go for it. I was like, cool, thanks, I love you. All the things. And she was like, I love you too. And so that's where, that comes from, finding your voice, listening to it, even when it shakes, especially then, because you are more important than anything. If you don't take care of yourself, if you don't love yourself, you can't take care of or love somebody else. Okay, because here's what I've learned. If your voice is shaking, it probably means something important is happening. It means you're growing. It means you're stepping into something bigger. It means you're taking a chance. It means you're being honest. It means you're being brave. And that's worth celebrating. So if you're listening today and you're standing at a crossroads, listen to yourself. Trust yourself. Give yourself permission to hear your own voice. Not because you'll always be right, but because you'll never learn to trust yourself if you never let yourself speak. Maybe that's a lesson I want to leave you with today. Being wanted is nice. Being chosen is beautiful. But learning to choose yourself, learning to trust yourself, learning to listen to your own voice, that changes everything. Because at the end of the day, the relationship you're going to spend the most time in is the one you have with yourself. So make it a good one. And like any relationship, it's going to have its ups and downs. You're going to listen to yourself, and you're going to sit there and you're going to argue with yourself. I have conversations a lot with my head, or in my head, and I tell a lot of people that I have to get professional advice. And so I'm talking to myself, and sometimes I talk out loud. Like, I'll be sitting in my room and I'm talking to myself out loud. Lucky for me, I have a dog, so I just pretend I'm talking to him, and then the voices in my head that are all just me reply back to whatever I'm saying, since my dog can't talk. I'm sure if he could, I would never hear the end of anything. But anyways, but sometimes you have to consult yourself, just like you have your counsel of your friends. And you, like, for me personally, when I'm going on a date or if I'm talking to a guy, I'll be like, okay, let me consult the counsel, and it's just a group chat of me and my girls, or me and my uncles. And I'll sit there and I'll be like, hey, this guy said this guy did this is what's happening, this is how I feel, this is blah 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 blah. If I can do it with them, I can do it with myself. So I'll sit there and I'll think, and I'll sit there and I'll talk, and I'll start having conversations. And the last conversation I had with myself was about a customer that came in, and he's probably about, I'm going to say probably 20 to 30 years older than me. And he was very straightforward, but he was very flirtatious. And I liked the flirting until it made me a little uncomfortable. And what made me uncomfortable was the fact that, like, he was like, what time do you get off? A lot of people ask me the question. I'm not worried about it. Whatever. I was like, I get off at 6 a.m. He was like, okay, what if you come to my place? No, we're not doing that. I was like, no, I really want to go to bed once I get off. Plus, I have a dog that I have to get back to that literally, I swear on everything, cusses me out as soon as I walk through the door. This morning, he literally screamed. I wish I was kidding. But I was like, no, and it, like, freaked me out. It was like 5:30 in the morning, and so I texted two of my best friends, and I was like, text me as soon as you wake up, knowing damn well my ass was gonna be asleep. Then I texted my uncle and was like, are you awake? Because he's normally, like, awake throughout the night. And so I was like, hey, are you awake? He wasn't awake either. I was like, bro, why is nobody on my sleep schedule? That's not the point. Anyways, we were talking about it. I'm used to growing up thinking that, like, older men flirting with younger girls is, like, gross. Like, and it is for an age. Once you hit about 18, age is just kind of a number, especially outside of high school. I mean, my uncles were talking about it, and I was like, yeah, but it made me, like, so uncomfortable. Like, I felt like he was trying to groom me, and I didn't want it. I didn't like it. I didn't want anything to do with it. I liked the flirting. It was fine. I loved having the attention. At the same time, don't make me uncomfortable. Like, there's a line. I set a boundary. You kept pushing. Once people start pushing that boundary, that's when the voice in my head starts, like, kind of like an alarm. That's where the shaking really starts. Is like, okay, listen. And so, like, I had to talk to myself and think about why it actually, like, bothered me, because I didn't, like, understand why it bothered me so much, besides the fact that he was just like, well, why don't you come over? First off, take me on a date first. Secondly, I don't just go over to strangers' houses. That's not how this works. Not in this day and age. But seriously, have conversations with yourself. Sit in the silence. Write it down if you have to. I journal a lot. I have journals all over the place that I just kind of, like, pick up right in, do whatever. I make songs. I have a songbook. I have, like, I just write. My notes is filled. My Google Docs is filled. My journals are filled. I just like writing. It helps me think. It helps me process what I'm saying. It helps. So if journaling helps, do it. But anyways, I won't ramble on for much longer. So that's all I've got for today. Thank you for hanging out with me. Thank you for listening. Thank you for growing with me. And wherever you are in your journey right now, whether you're confident, confused, healing, thriving, struggling, or somewhere in between, I'm proud of you. keep going, keep growing, keep listening to your voice, even when it shakes, especially then. If you're in the DFW area, go check out my mom's flower shop. It's Flower Snobs. It's in Fort Worth off of Bryant Irving. Go get that card. Go get some knickknacks. Go get some beautiful flowers. Get them for your girlfriends. If you're guys or girls, get them for your moms. Get them for your sisters. Get them from everybody because our flowers are beautiful and they smell amazing. But anyways, I love y'all and I'll talk to you in the next week. Bye, besties.